Okay, we're back. We were, as I recall, we had just finished 3.1, facilities, real estate, environment, and energy. So now we are going on to fleet services. So do we have questions of fleet services? Councillor Clerk?
No, Councillor Clerk did. He was showing them to me, and he is not here.
Okay.
Here he is. Fleet services. Fleet.
We're on to fleet. I'll let you sit down.
See what happens when you don't give this man a binder. I want a binder. Give him a binder.
You need to get paperless, bro.
$1.25 to make sure he has a binder.
Well, mind you, we do have increased staffs who could probably do it yourself.
Okay, we want to finish already.
Okay. So we're on fleet services. Councillor Perks.
All right. Let's go to your capital plan. So I notice you're actually doing very well in terms of that. What I couldn't figure out from this, though, is whether or not we're purchasing the fleets to the needs of the various departments that you now serve. Is there somewhere in the note that describes that?
Through the chair, it would be described at a high level, I guess. If you look at the table, I'm not sure what page it's on, that speaks to the state of good repair backlog. There's primarily two divisions that remain: transportation and parks, forestry, and rec, where we need to do a little bit more work. But over the last 3 years, the state of good repair backlog has dropped by 48%, so we're on the right track.
I noticed that. It jumped out at me because it's so unlike all the other divisions. So when you say transportation and PF&R, what are the holes there?
Through the chair, transportation and PFR make up about 61% of the backlog at $17 and $15 million respectively.
Okay. And just, could you give me a sense what kind of vehicles we're having trouble with that, where we're currently not up?
Through the chair, honestly, it's a wide range of vehicles from light duty equipment up to and including off-road equipment in transportation, and PFR is similar because it's across parks, across forestry, and in recreation it would mainly be light duty, so mainly parks and forestry.
And you're saying you'll be there in term, like within 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, we're absolutely making progress.
Okay. The one thing that I didn't see in here, which I'm used to seeing in analyst notes, is the stuff on our green fleets plan.
Through the chair, we'll be reporting back in Q2, Q3 of this year with the 2014 to 18 Green Fleet Plan wrap-up. I can say that it has been a success. I don't have any more specifics beyond that at this point. And at the same time, we will be coming forward with the 2019 to 2023 Green Fleet Plan, and that's for the entire city's fleet.
Right. And what's considered a green vehicle keeps changing as technology does, so I look forward to that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions on fleet.
Thank you. Any other questions on fleet?
Yep.
Councillor Layton.
Yeah, the alternative service delivery model, that was the one adopted by council in 2016. Can you explain what that means to this year's budget?
Certainly. Through the chair, the alternative service delivery model adopted in 2016 and subsequent to 2017 budget approval. What that was is organizationally as a whole, we were failing. We weren't doing as much as we needed to, and we wanted to refocus our efforts on the core. And through the 5-year plan, what it results is a cost reduction each year of around $700,000 across the city. And there's been a number of initiatives that I can certainly expand on if you'd like, related to that.
The fix to fail repair ratio. So last year, 2 years ago, 2017, we performed poorly. Wouldn't you say? Is it more expensive to fix it when it fails, or do preventative maintenance?
Through the chair, you're exactly right. If fix on fail, so if you fix something after it breaks, think of a vehicle. If it fails, what's the first thing you do? You have to tow it. and the excess downtime. So a fix-on-fail repair as opposed to a preventative repair is about 30% more costly. So in that ASD report, based on 2015 data, we were 20% preventative maintenance up to, as of the end of 2018, 52 or 56, so 160% improvement. It's
Where do we want to have that?
the target is 60%, and so we're getting close to that.
How would we get there?
So the pieces I just spoke about earlier with respect to addressing the SOGR backlog in those remaining divisions, getting the fleet within optimum life is key. So economic life, where operating costs start to outweigh capital costs, that's your focal point.
So in layman's terms, let's do maintenance in advance. Let's do more maintenance in advance to try to reduce the fix-it-fail.
Through the chair, that's correct, but a key piece that goes hand in hand with that is don't keep the vehicles too long. If you keep vehicles and run them into the ground, older vehicles cost more money. They break down more. So you want to replace your assets in that economic life period.
How do the various divisions feel about you reducing their fleet size?
So through the chair, reducing the fleet size. So the theory is if you look at the older model where you know you're going to have 5 out of 10 vehicles in the shop, well, of course, you keep spares. You have very important taxpayer services to deliver. So if you're turning the vehicles around, your fleet availability is there, you're focusing on preventative maintenance, you don't need as many vehicles in the fleet, and there's less cost. So you're able to deliver the same services with fewer assets.
And on the fleet size reduction facility, we're going to be using car share, our own car share system?
Through the chair, there's currently 2. There's a current car share program with 2 car share companies that exists right now, and it's open to all city divisions and agencies. And the second phase of that is making better use of our existing city assets where we put technology in the vehicle so that we can share them cross-divisionally, and we develop a cost model for them.
Okay. And I should point out too, though, that you've brought some new services in-house because you found, quote, a net savings and reduced downtime, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we'll go on to IT, information technology. Councillor Carroll.
Okay. I am looking at all of the issues for discussion, the whole piece around cloud solutions. And I'm remembering back to last year's budget when we were looking at sustainability of the structure we have, but also starting to move to being able to provide system-wide cloud services. But I see that it looks like that is unfunded. But now it's unfunded, and we're also going to be unfunded in the sustainment reserve for the system that we do have. Is that the case? We're going to be, the sustainment reserve is going to be, sustainment equipment reserve will be done by 2020 unless we improve on that budget?
Through the, excuse me, through the chair, Councillor, I'm going to try and answer that 2-part question, specifically as it relates to the sustainment reserve.
Yeah.
As we increase our technology footprint, which means, let's say, more devices, more technology, we draw on the reserve a little bit more. In the life cycle replacement of hardware and software, depending on the technology that we've acquired, it has a different refresh schedule. As you see in terms of the sustainment reserve depleting, when we do things like a large software replacement for all of our desktop and tablet devices, it's a big draw. It's those one-time draws that's really once every 5 years that's making the big dip in a reserve, in reserve. So we are actually working with financial planning to see what kind of strategy we can do to address that. So it's not really a risk to our services, but it is coming up with an optimal financial model in that case.
So is the issue more that the contributions we're making to it really just don't recover it in a 5-year cycle?
Correct. It's not aligning. Correct.
Yeah. if you need to have 20 million in there, then putting 2 million a year in there is not going to give you what you need every 5 years. Is that the issue?
Through the chair, I would agree, but I'm going to maybe see if financial planning want to comment. Josie, did you want to add to that, or?
So through you, Mr. Chair, so this is a contribution made annually from the non-program budget. It was the consolidation of when we actually used to lease our computers, then we turned that into a buy. And so that funding was augmented last year by an additional 2 million. So that's currently what we have, but as the CIO indicated, as we expand the footprint and we have more items, then, you know, it's that level of funding is just not sustainable for all of it. So there's work being done on rationalization as well, and some policy work around what, you know, we do end up replenishing, and then looking at a funding model to see how do we add to this level of contribution.
Okay, and the issue around the cloud systems, you note in issues for discussion that what we need is a funding model. Has council not ordered an actual strategy or that a financial model be built to achieve that system-wide?
Through the chair, just pausing and thinking, we have, I think, ratified direction through our senior leadership team in terms of being a priority. I don't think we have a council mandate.
Right, so senior management sees the need of it in the system. So there's a steering committee, there's what is it, an architecture board. So you're sort of looking at, you know, when the day comes that we say we're going to fund this and you've got to do it, you're ready to go. But we're at a point now where we're committing staff to being ready to go, but you have no funding model to proceed with it. Is that where we're at?
Through the
I'm
chair.
just trying to understand this note.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair again.
Yeah.
We've been tackling them, I'd say, one by one. But we know the industry is moving more and more towards cloud solutions only being available. Do we have a finalized financial model that will take us to the future decades? We're still working on that.
Okay. And what's the urgency here? Is there a resource savings, a positive impact on not having to use traditional old enterprise systems and all the storage that goes with going to a cloud-based system over the long run? Is that an efficiency?
Your last question.
Through the chair, there's various factors on why you move to cloud solutions. One of the driving factors is on-premise solutions are decreasing. They're not even available anymore. Most vendors are just offering cloud. Second of all, there's always a financial component in anything that we select to make sure it works financially, but there's also integration. Does it work with what we have? And interoperability, making sure that it connects with other devices and ultimately allows us to deliver services that we require. So there's various factors that we can consider. Finance is one of them, but not the only one.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Seeing none, we did a run through a little earlier. I don't think there are any questions for the CFO, Controller of Financial Services. Is that correct? Well, we did a quick run through, Council, but unfortunately you weren't here, so we just wanted to.
No, I was here because you did it a second time, but what I didn't realize that the Office of Controller is relatively new. What I didn't realize is that's where I should place my purchasing questions.
Oh, okay. So what do we do? How about the CFO? We'll just, any questions of the CFO?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
And it's an overarching, simple question.
The staff have they've gone back to their offices. They're going to come back to be able to answer that question, or for the control.
It's a really basic question.
Why don't you answer, and we'll.
I will be happy to ask it over the television. Looking across the board at abilities to spend, is there an adequate amount of resource devoted to high capital divisions such that purchasing is not impacting each division's ability to spend? We often gain insight from asking that same question every year.
So through the chair, when we look at the timeline associated to procurement, it involves many different facets, not just purchasing. It involves legal.
That's correct. Yep.
It involves negotiating contracts, executing contracts, et cetera. So when we look at the time horizon of 100 days being the target timeline, only a portion of that, in actual fact, represents purchasing activities. There's the program activity, as I mentioned, legal, et cetera. So there are resources that are dedicated to only focusing on procurement. And as you may be aware, there's also a modernization project underway to advance how we approach purchasing on a go-forward basis from a supply chain perspective, looking at themes of purchasing rather than one-offs. So we are resourced to actually address the modernization of the project, but as well, we are resourcing ourselves in a way that when the project is completed, that we will have the right skill sets in the right places.
Okay, and the resourcing that you do have is on track. It's meeting the timelines that for the modernization that were set, I think in we got a more full presentation on it in 2017, I believe. We're on track?
As far as I know, we are on track.
Okay. Okay, that was the only question.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Perks, quickly.
I have one on the, it's also purchasing. How are we doing with the implementation of, I'm forgetting what we called it, but it's social procurement,
Oh, social enterprise, yeah.
social enterprise. Does anyone know that?
So I will absolutely follow up.
Okay.
And sorry, the staff aren't here, so I can
Yeah.
certainly follow up.
And that's
Happy
okay.
to get you a response.
If someone could just give me a call and talk to me about that before we go to final wrap-up, that would be great.
That's good. Okay, I'm going to go to other city programs now. The city manager's office. Questions?
Oh, city manager policy.
City manager's office.
Oh, city manager's office, yes.
Councillor Perks first.
Actually, Councillor Carroll can go first because she caught it and I didn't.
Ooh, that's scary. The questions are about HR. Hold on a sec, I'm having to, now he gets to say, yeah, this is what being paperless gets you. So under city management, city manager's office, first of all, in the service levels, for strategic and corporate policy, the policy shop, the service level gives descriptions of what they do, one of them being including meeting council requests to develop new policy, but there are no metrics. It's just a description that those are things. The columns of how often are you able to keep up with the kinds of directions that council is giving you, there's no metric there. So I have no way of measuring whether or not are we overwhelming, have you got enough policy staff on site? Is there a plan to flesh out that service level?
So I guess a couple of points here. As noted in the overview, there are obviously been a number of vacancies that we've carried throughout the years, which would beg the question, are we able to kind of meet the standards that you're talking about? So we haven't communicated numerically if we're able to keep up. So that's something that I can certainly take back with staff and see if that's something that we could in fact report on. Okay.
And I noted there's some deletion of positions in HR, and yet at least throughout the budget, there are a number of places, and I don't want to single a division out right now, but there are a handful of places where their ability to continue things, or their ability to fill vacant positions that would in fact improve their service levels, the note is that the hiring process is taking a long time. And I'm wondering if we could look at that in terms of what HR's own service levels are, because while it tells us about recruitment, average number of days to fill a non-union vacancy, the service level is 63, 63 days, I should say, and last year it was 65, for instance, only slightly above. But we often, when we're asking about these things, anecdotally, we hear it takes longer than 2 months to fill some of these positions. Is that market availability, Or are there key places in the organization where it takes longer than the service level we've set, just in the nature of posting the job?
I think the information that is in there is the average. However, the reasons why it might take longer in any circumstance will depend on the particular jobs. In some cases, it is the nature of the position, and they're just hard to fill positions. And in some cases, where you have heard from divisions about challenges with recruitment, sometimes it's about the competitiveness of the compensation that's being offered. So those are things that we're reviewing, but it's really hard to say in general terms what the challenge might be, but those tend to be the issues: compensation, or just some positions are just harder to fill just because of the skill sets necessary.
Okay. And there isn't a metric for union staff. Is that because that there's a function outside of HR that makes that possible? Parks and Rec does their own seasonals, that sort of thing?
Well, the process you're talking about, there is no metric for how long it takes to fill union positions? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. That is harder to anticipate just because of the collective agreement rules dictate different processes, and so and some of those processes are outside of our control in terms of it's not just posting. Sometimes there is order of consideration. There are a number of factors that can impact those, but we can certainly look to see what metrics we have and can provide in that regard.
So there are different metrics, but HR as an office unit does have a function in those hirings?
Yes. HR, our strategic recruitment function, does support both union and non-union recruitment. And
for instance, the nature of our business is all the way up to community planners. That's a union position, and yet I don't have a metric here. And that one we hear every year. We can't get them hired fast enough to deal with our growth. So the question is, why are we deleting 2 positions that would help get this work done?
Last question.
I can answer the 2 positions that are being deleted, as I understand it, are client-funded positions where the funding is no longer available. So these are not HR-funded positions that are being deleted.
Right. They were to target divisions that needed additional help, but could they not be used somewhere else where this delay in hiring is rearing its ugly head? Could we not transfer those positions, or you would have to ask for them again? What's the situation?
Those positions are part, there's no funding source in HR's budget for those positions, so if the clients that are funding them are no longer prepared to fund them, then we cannot maintain those positions, so that's why they're being deleted.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to legal services. Legal services. Councillor Perks.
Yeah, very quickly. Last year and the year before, we had a conversation about the adequacy of the legal staff supporting the planning department. And I was assured that work would be done to better staff up there. Can you give me a sense of where we are with that?
We did, through you, Chair, we did receive additional funding through the Development Application Review Fund, and we have hired 4 additional lawyers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Layton.
Thank you. Is there a difference between the work of a barrister and a solicitor?
Yes.
Can you explain that to me?
A barrister is someone who goes to court, and a solicitor is someone who does other sorts of legal work. Actually, more than half of the work we do is solicitors' work, probably along the lines of 2/3. Because all of our real estate lawyers are solicitors, all of our lawyers in the municipal law group are solicitors, all of our lawyers in transit expansion are solicitors, and then we have a litigation group and a couple of groups that are hybrids, like planning and employment law.
So has the workload between the 2 changed as a result of the LPAT being introduced?
Under the Bill 139 regime, we anticipate that there will be less barrister work, so fewer hearings, and there will be more work for the solicitors. There is a chart in our materials where you see a drop in the OMB hearings, or the LPAD hearings, anticipated in future years, but we don't necessarily anticipate a drop in staff levels because we expect, under this new regime, that there will be more solicitors' work for the planning lawyers. Now, to prepare the record for these matters, because a different sort of record would be required up front. Now, that being said, it's early days, so it's difficult for us to tell. And right now, we've had a significant increase in the number of hearings because of the overlap of the two regimes, with Bill 139 being new and a lot of applicants rushed to put their applications in before the switch over to the new regime.
So am I to take from that that the amount of work has actually increased as a result of the introduction of the LPAD, or is that a trend that's going to continue?
At present, the amount of work has increased because of the overlap of the two systems. We are hoping that it will level out in time. That's our expectation.
And legal is expected to underspend their approved budget for this past year, correct?
Yes.
And that's because of a delay in hiring?
Well, there are a few factors. One is that we've had quite a few retirements, and the people who've retired were, of course, senior lawyers, and they've been replaced with junior lawyers. We've had some gapping. We also have some positions approved for transit-related projects, and because there's a bit of uncertainty, we haven't filled them yet.
Because of uncertainty?
Yeah, just a bit of uncertainty regarding workflow.
An uncertainty regarding what transit projects we'll be planning next year?
No, just the workflow.
I'm uncertain as to what transit projects we'll be planning next year, so you're right to be as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go on to, oh, I'm sorry, Francis. Councillor Nunziata.
Just have a question. As far as outside legal counsel, have our fees increased? And if it has, by how much? I don't see it anywhere in the notes that I have, so.
For you, Mr. Chair, we do have a small amount of outside legal that comes out of our budget. We do try to do most work in-house. When we hire outside legal, it often comes from the budget of one of the other divisions because it's tied to a particular project, generally a large project where we don't feel we have capacity. So I don't have stats for those ones because they're not in the legal services budget. Do you have a number?
Do we have any OMB hearings that have been going on for years and we've hired outside lawyers?
I don't believe so. I know we have some where we have hired outside lawyers, but I can't say that there's anything that has been going on for longer than it should have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, City Clerk's office. Oh, Councillor Perks, I didn't see your hand up.
I had it up good and high, Gary. I actually was hurting my shoulder there.
Assume it.
Where? They've gone into hiding. Oh, hello. Hi. So turning to page 28 of the analyst notes, I see the unmet capital needs not included in the staff recommended 10-year capital plan, and one of those is 16 million for new voting machines. Why did you think we needed new voting machines?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. We need new voting machines because ours have been around since the year 2000, and they are now at the end of their lifespan. In fact, we now can no longer get replacement parts for the equipment, and it needs to be replaced.
We can no longer get replacement parts.
That's right. We have been scavenging from our own.
So effectively, every year we have fewer and fewer voting machines because we're scavenging some for parts.
No, actually, they've performed remarkably well.
I was thrilled with the outcome. Council has debated on several occasions, and I suspect will again debate this term, the issue of ranked choice balloting. I know that 2 or 3 municipalities in the province of Ontario did it for the first time this election. Are our vote tabulators capable of handling ranked choice ballots?
No, they are not.
So if council decided to do that, we would have to amend the capital plan and put out a tender and find a vendor and get them and test them and so on. From deciding that we need voting machines to actually having them operate in an election, how long does that take?
I would say 2 years, year and a half to 2 years.
So the clock is ticking down if we want that to be an option.
Well, I think I just want to reassure the members of the committee that this year on our work plan, one of our key items is to prepare a report for council. We are currently studying the options that council would have available with respect to equipment. And yes, ranked choice will be certainly one of the criteria for recommending the equipment.
Okay, and I don't know if this is to you or to the analyst who wrote your notes. One of the most cryptic things I have seen in any of the analyst notes is on page 29 at the bottom, there's a paragraph that says the election reserve funds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Its sustainability will therefore need to be closely monitored. Should I be worried? Is this just...
I can take a stab and then perhaps financial planning can jump in. The reserve fund has been in not great shape over the last number of years. However, we have been able from the surplus each year to put sufficient money back into it to bring it up to the level that it needs to be. We're fine for the next few years. However, I think what you need to understand, Mr. Chair, is that if council were to decide to lease equipment, that would be not coming from the reserve, and we would have to find a way to bring that into operating.
What's the surplus you're talking about that you're...
The corporate surplus.
Corporate surplus. So we don't actually budget directly to replenish the election reserve. We just sufficiently, we just gamble on the corporation generating a surplus, or?
As I indicated, Mr. Chair, we did bring the amount up to a sufficient level for the next several years. However, bearing that one contingency, we need to keep a close eye on it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, I wanted to ask a question about replacing the voting machines, but to someone listening, it'll seem like that's all we care about, even though Clerks does a lot of things, but that is the unmet capital need that's highlighted, and that's why we're asking. I know with some surprise the cost of it, because we have been talking about the fact that we're going to hit the wall with this equipment for a few years now. But the amount of money it would take to replace it, am I imagining this, or has it gone down? I can remember talking about this in a magnitude of 30 million.
It was in the order, I believe, of 20-odd million a number of years ago. In order to bring it in line with various requirements of the budget, yes, it was reduced slightly. Frankly, we won't know what the cost is until we go out and do the study and bring some options back to you.
Okay. And if we are comparable to others and up to date, closer to state of the art on this equipment and able to do ranked balloting, does it also produce revenue? Are we able to contract this technology out?
Well, that would depend on so many factors. I couldn't possibly guess at that. It again depends on the option that we we use. There is a possibility, certainly the equipment that we have has been extensively used by other municipalities across the country and in North America and the Philippines.
Right, and so if we update it, we keep ourselves in demand for those purposes.
I think that's fair to say, yes.
Okay, but it is an unmet need, and there is no placeholder in the budget, even though we know that even having overhauled it, it's unlikely that we could use this in 2022?
Oh, I don't think that's our intention. I think the intent, well, the current equipment, I don't think I would want to use in 2022. I think it really is to the point where if council has other requirements, as for example, ranked choice, then I think we won't be able to go there. Could it do one more election? Our vendor is not happy with that idea. And I think, you know, if we bring back a report shortly, I think we can discuss various options for funding. So it would be a new project. The frustration I have throughout the budget, and this is my last question, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. We know we need it replaced. We know there's a deadline on this. And in a way, it's a state of good repair issue because, you know, we need this equipment, but it's not going to work for us in 2022. Why would we not, since we are contemplating a 10-year capital plan, put a placeholder in the budget to show that there will be some significant expenditure needed in the out years? There seems to be no indicator that this money has to be spent one way or the other. It's just highlighted as an unmet need, but there's no placeholder in the 10-year plan.
So so from a corporate perspective, the unmet need list is in fact our placeholder place because to put it into the capital plan needs some funding. So I think I said this the other day that anything that we bring into the capital plan isn't just a placeholder in terms of an estimate. We would have to make room in the 10-year plan for all these matters. But this is something that we're going to have to fund within the 10 years, and it will be us that has to fund it. This is not something that we can send a request to the federal government and say, would you buy us some new voting machines? That's correct, Councillor. And so just in the unmet needs list that we keep on behalf of everyone, and you're seeing them program by program.
Yep, over and over and over.
Over and over again. So there's one for everybody. And what we do is we take those and we actually put it into two tiers, those that are most critical and those that have more time. And so we are looking at that list annually as we're going through the budget process. So actually having these things on our radar allows us to actually anticipate what are those criticalities that we must absolutely address. And so those are the things and that's how we use the list. So while we don't have current funding today for all these elements that have been identified, you know, we have to kind of triage them and look at the priorities annually to see what we can actually build in. And we know, we've been talking with the clerk for at least, 5 years, Yuli?
Oh, I think longer.
You know, the visibility of knowing that these voting machines were coming and what's the best way. And until the work is done that the clerk has identified, knowing whether we're going to actually purchase or lease, we'll have a different funding strategy.
Okay,
thank you. Any other questions on the city clerks? We'll go to City Council next. Councillor Layton, City Council.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm just out of curiosity, who writes the City Council briefing note? Who actually writes the sections of it?
Financial planning and with input from us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? No, okay. That's good. On to the Office of the Mayor. Councillor Layton.
Who writes the briefing note for the Office of the Mayor?
Financial planning with input from the mayor's office and us as well.
It's very interesting. Input, you say. So page 9 of the briefing note from the mayor. And I recognize this isn't the first time it's being done this way because I've looked at the past couple. in service performance, under key accomplishments, this looks much more like a piece of election, like part of an election pamphlet than it does an actual like staff report. Because when you compare, there's not even a key accomplishments section in the city councilors area, and I can guarantee you that 95% of what's listed here could also be written in that section. But rather, in that section, it says we've gone over budget. And not a single word about the number of meetings attended. This also doesn't include that, because this actually just includes things like encouraging investment in Toronto by keeping taxes down. Like, that's actually listed as a key accomplishment. So I'm just curious, in the future, could I get input into the City Council key accomplishment section? Because the mayor's got a significant, is obviously holding the pen in this regard, and it's just a little disturbing. Now, so further to that, if the recommendation within the 2019 analyst notes for a change, a percentage change to the office budget is at 12.9%, but the 2018 budget analyst notes for the mayor's office didn't predict this increase. It just had really just a 1.5%, 2% increase in the mayor's budget. I'm just wondering, who would have written in that 13% increase? Who determined or made the request for that? Was it clerks or was it the mayor's office?
Mayor's office.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, we're all done that section. We're now going to Toronto Transit Commission, TTC.
Wait a minute, we didn't do the office of the mayor.
Well, I did. I just asked, he just...
Got more?
I thought you were doing the council budget.
No.
Oh. Did you have
That's
questions?
okay, I'll ask my questions on Twitter.
Yeah, me too.
If you're in a hurry, I
Yeah, I
understand,
can use
Mr.
Twitter.
Chair.
Councillor Crawford got additional staff?
Welcome to the Budget Committee. Eagerly anticipating your presentation, and you'll get questions, of course, after that. So, one or two. Okay. Anyway, it's all yours.
Thank you. Through you, Youth Chair. We appreciate the opportunity to present our recommended 2019 operating and capital budget, as well as the plan. Our CFO, Dan Wright, and Head of Finance, Steve Conforti, will walk you through the detail. But before they do, I'd like to set a little context. It's important that you, our customers, and the public understand what's driving our budget. As I said at the TTC's January 24th board meeting, the TTC is a very large, integrated transit system. We move more people per day on just our streetcar network than any other system in the GTHA. Our talented and dedicated employees pull off the miracle of moving 1.7 million customers each business day, a staggering 500 million customer trips per year, making us the third largest transit system in North America, only behind Mexico City and New York City. If our bus fleet alone was a standalone transit system, it would be the 5th largest in North America. This was a very difficult budget to prepare, and some tough decisions had to be made. I'm very proud, though, that every single minute of service, every single service improvement, and every single customer service enhancement has been maintained. We have the 2-hour transfer, the hop on, hop off, TTC Go discount fare, kids ride free. We have the Line 1 extension to Vaughan, the 10-minute bus network, as well as the early Sunday openings. In an era of fiscal restraint affecting all levels of government and all public agencies, this is a long list of service improvements that added value for our customers. Doesn't necessarily stop right there. On our subway system, we're now consistently pushing through more than 26 to 27 trains through Bloor and Yonge every rush hour, and on 3 days in December of last year, we had as many as 29 trains go through that station. On line 1, to deal with crowding, we've added 4 runners-directed trains in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. And what does this mean? It means that more than 5,000 people now have the ability to move and go where they need to go during that peak rush hour morning. A year ago, we struggled to consistently put out 100% of our promised bus service. As these snapshots comparing one day in November of 17 to one day in November of 18, as you can see, we're now typically putting out at least 100% every day, helped enormously by the new bus fleets, but also by the determination of our staff to achieve that goal. A year ago, we also struggled to consistently put out 100% of our promised streetcar service, now augmented with buses, as we wait for the remainder of the 204 streetcars to come from Babati at the end of this year, but we're typically putting out at least 100% of the service that we advertise. I was clear to staff during this budget process on a number of things. That all service had to be protected, every service improvement, every customer service enhancement over the last 4 years. I would tell you that we're not perfect at the TTC. The TTC has a big, complicated, aging asset mix, and things do go wrong. The extremely cold weather and the heavy snow over the past 2 weeks affected our subway switches, and we had to pull our older streetcars off the street. Our streetcars are older than 40 years old with a design life of 30 years. I often tell people we get good life out of our assets. But I can tell you that today our service is better than it was 5 years ago, and that I'm determined to continue that improvement and make it better going forward. Now, before I turn it over to Dan and Steve, I'd also like to share a few thoughts about our capital investment plan, a 15-year look ahead at our state of good repair and growth needs. As some of you know, I'm very passionate about putting out the service that we advertise, and I need to take a hard look at doing that today and going forward. Since 2014, we began itemizing an increasingly long list of unfunded capital requirements for state of good repair and growth. And what I'd like to do is be able to tell you what the fundamental difference between these two important needs is. State of good repair is about sustaining what you have, and growth is about increasing what you have to address customers' needs. And a simple example of this is that we put out over 1,600 buses every day. State of good repair would be maintaining those buses and replacing them at the end of their life, while growth is about buying additional buses to accommodate the population growth in the region. So each year we put between 10 and 15 additional buses out in service for just that. I would say that I have to be clear in this context. What we're not talking about when we mention growth is expansion. When I stepped into the acting role of CEO a year ago, I became concerned about how the TTC reported its capital needs using terms like funded, unfunded, deferred, future consideration, below the line. And most of these terms have been used interchangeably. I was also concerned about the fact that too many of these projects, although discussed, weren't even costed because there was no money. Excuse me. And in too many cases, people also made the assumption that many capital projects were funded and underway. And that wasn't true. And just to give you a partial list, I'm just going to mention a few. New subway trains for Line 2, additional subway trains for Line 1, new streetcars beyond those arriving at the end of this year, new buses for those arriving beyond this year and early of 2020, the Young and Bloor Station revitalization, subway train storage and maintenance facilities, and subway fire ventilation systems. None of these have been funded. When Dan Wright joined the TTC last April as our CFO, one of the first things I asked him to do was make a top priority was to make a clear picture of the TTC's capital needs for the 2019 budget process, and that document is before you today. So with that, what I'll do now is I'll turn it over to Dan and Steve and walk you through the 2019 operating and capital budgets as well as the new plan. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick, and through the chair, thank you, councillors, for permitting us to be here today to talk about our 2019 operating budget and our 10-year capital budget and plan and 15-year capital investment plan. As Rick said, when we sat down last spring to have a first look at the 2019 budget, he made 4 things very clear. First, we had to consistently deliver the service that we advertise. We had to respond to customer demand for service, including maintaining, as he put it at the time, maintaining every minute of service that we had. We had to be thinking long-term about preserving system reliability and improving existing capacity. And we had to be thinking about protecting revenue responsibly and respectfully. And that's part of the challenge. There are others, but calling out those four in particular, that's part of the challenge that he gave to us as we started to have a first kick of the 2019 budget. We also had to be mindful of board-adopted strategies and plans, and there's several that we could call out, but focusing in particular on just three. First of all, the corporate plan, and that's a whole presentation in itself. But those of you who are familiar with the corporate plan will know that the critical path number one was transform for financial sustainability. And what struck me as curious when I joined the TTC was, why would transform for financial sustainability be number one? Why wouldn't it be some of these other ones? But as I settled into the TTC, I came to see the financial sustainability challenge in front of us. And there's a lot, when we talk about critical path one, we tend to focus on transform for financial sustainability, focus on financial sustainability. But the other thing that's become clear to me is how much energy at the TTC goes into this idea of transform. So the second set of points on this page are the capital investment plan. And it's often been said that if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And Rick made it clear to me that one of the things he felt we had to do was make it much clearer what our state of good repair and growth capital investment requirements were. So Steve will be talking to you more about that in a few minutes, but that very much, as we thought about how do we make transform for financial sustainability mean something, it's not just coming cap in hand asking for more money, it's also being clear on what we need, why we need it, and as I'll talk about in a minute, transforming how we run the business to make sure we're as efficient and effective as possible. Presto is a third one that I'm calling out here for a couple of reasons. It seems remarkable to me that just a few months ago we were 20–30% Presto usage. As of last week, we were 78% of fares being paid with Presto. So it is now our predominant payment system. It's imperative we get this right. It's imperative that it work for our customers. It's also imperative that we make maximum use of it. Presto is giving us new fare policy and pricing options, for example, the 2-hour transfer. Some of you may be aware that the analytics are a little rough, a little bit approximate, but roughly 3% or so of our riders are taking advantage of the 2-hour transfer. It's been quite a hit even in the early months. It's also going to give us data to inform pricing, service planning, fare inspection. It's a tool that we've just never had before. Coming back to business modernization and transformation, just so much going on here, and if there are any questions on that, Rick or Steve or I would be happy to answer them. But one in particular to focus on is our commitment in the corporate plan to conduct a comprehensive review of all the services we provide, what we do in-house, what others can help us do, including shared services with city programs and agencies, and more on that in the months to come. Sometimes I think being part of the TTC that I might be in professional sports. The number of metrics that we track and report on monthly is extraordinary. For those of you who are not familiar with our monthly CEO report, just chock-a-block full of how we are constantly measuring ourselves. And so here we have three, our on-time performance for bus, streetcar, and subway, but there's just so much that we track in order to understand our performance and try and improve. I want to spend a bit of time on this slide, slide 13 in your package. There's a lot going on here, so let me unpack it. And this is very much coming from my perspective as CFO. There's so many things that we could look at, but one of the things that I'm, of course, interested in, as many of us are, is this question of how healthy is the system from the point of view of ridership. There's a lot going on in this chart, but first of all, a couple of definitions. We refer to rides or ridership. Sometimes we use the word revenue ridership. A ride is somebody's journey. So you get on the system, you do whatever you're doing, you get off the system if it's a ride. If during your ride you were on the bus and then you were on the streetcar, that's 2 boardings because you were on the bus and then you were on the streetcar, but it's 1 ride. And so one of the questions that we've been grappling with is why is ridership falling? Because everyone talks about how the system seems as crowded as ever. Steve likes to say that even though measured ridership is going down a bit, you still can't take your knapsack off. You still have to take your knapsack off on the subway in the morning coming in. And so what this chart shows is between 2015 and 2019 forecast, what is going on with 4 things. What's going on with ridership, revenue ridership, what's going on with boardings, total revenues, and average fare. The blue bar is what's going on with ridership baseline to 100 in 2015. And you can see in 2016, 2017, 2018, the blue bar goes down, which means that our measured ridership is going down. But oddly enough, boardings are going up. And that's consistent with what people are experiencing. The system seems busier than ever. And what breaks the tie, one going down, one going up, is the green line, passenger revenue. And what that shows is passenger, even though ridership, revenue ridership is going down, actual revenue is going up. And when you adjust for a fare increase, 2 years ago, revenue is still going up a little bit over the last 4 years. So what that tells me is that a few things are going on. Certainly one of the things that is going on is that the Presto transition is likely contributed to lower measured ridership. And I'm glad that we're now at 80% use of Presto, because that's going to give us a solid baseline. We're not transitioning from one way of measuring riders to another way. We have a solid and in fact better technology with which to measure our ridership. And if I can sum it up from the point of view of a CFO, this is a picture. This picture is of a healthy transit system where you have higher boardings, you have stable, in fact, slightly increasing revenue. This is from a point of view, are our people using the system? This is a system that, with all the challenges that Rick mentioned, all the ways that we are striving to be better, this is a system that, at least from a ridership point of view, is a system in good shape, a system that we can even be proud of. I'm going to do a few slides on the operating budget, and then Steve will take us through the capital picture, where the money goes. $2.1 billion goes 93% into what we call the conventional service, and our second service is the Wheel-Trans service at 7%. And where the money comes from, you can see the various sources here. And a tip of the hat to the support that we get from the city, because this where the money comes from does not include debt service, which the city carries on the TTC's behalf for all the capital funding that you've given us. And that's quite a significant contribution to the TTC as well, which we greatly appreciate and depend on. In summary, here you can see the 2018 projected actual, what we're requesting for 2019. It's the dot points at the bottom that tell the story. A $763 million subsidy increase request. All 2018 service improvements maintained and annualized. I can't tell you how many times I went to Rick and said, Rick, I don't know how we're going to be able to do this. And Rick would throw me out of his office and say, we have to find a way to maintain every second of service. And so to get there, we asked our board to approve a 10-cent fare increase effective April 1st, 2019. And we are requesting an increase in city funding of $22 million. We were very reluctant to do this. As I said to the TTC board back on January 24th, Rick kept saying to me, no increase in subsidy request, no fare increase. And it was very late in the process that we finally realized that this was something that we were going to have to do. And this page is, have a look at what it was. We started with opening pressures of $180 million. We worked it down to 96. And you can see here what we were left with was $46 million in council directions, which were very excited to be implementing in terms of, for example, the 2-hour transfer, the annualization of capacity improvements, the little bit of additional service being put out to adhere to our service standards, and then of course we had the external events, collective bargaining, diesel price, what's going on with bus augmentation while the Eglinton Crosstown construction happens. And we bridged that $96 million with 4 different paths, which we're happy to talk about in question time if there are any, but essentially it wasn't intended to be more or less an even split, it's just the way it worked out, but about $24 million in efficiencies that we identified, $24 million worth of a variety of possible reductions, totaling $32 million. In fact, we found a couple more, so totaling $35 million, so we need to make $24 million of that stick, and then the funding increase of $22 million, and as I say, the funding increase, which we reluctantly are requesting, and the 10-cent fare increase, excluding the adult cash fare, which we are very reluctantly requesting. Cumulative base reduction, I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to turn it over to Steve right away, but suffice to say, this chart is a cumulative funding increase over the last 4 years, and what it shows is TTC has been quite fortunate with the funding increase that we've gotten from the city, but that funding increase has gone to things like council-directed enhancements, Presto concessions, what inflation does to our cost, TYSSE. And so the point of this slide is if you have a look at that last orange bar dipping down below the 0 line, we have, including the 2019 proposed budget, $108 million in base budget reductions over the last 4 years in order to pay for council-directed enhancements in Presto and so on. Over to you, Steve, on capital.
Thanks, Dan. So I'll run you through a few capital slides that we have for our 10-year recommended capital budget and plan. Really what we have in the TTC is 2 separate capital budgets and plans. There's the base capital budget and plan of about $6.5 billion in funding, as well as another $3.8 billion for our transit expansion projects. What you have here in front of you is a list of some of the major projects that are included in there. I won't take you through any detail, but if you are curious or interested in these, within our quarterly financial update report, we also have a section in there on our major capital project updates, which lists all our projects that we categorize as Category 3 or Category 4 projects, provide the status and how those projects are proceeding. On this slide, similar to operating, is where the money goes and where the money comes from. On the where the money goes side, so $6.5 billion on our base capital program is split between the 5 capital categories, the largest being our state of good repair funding. So state of good repair takes up about 77% of our base funding, and that's a mix mostly of our basic, our standard state of good repair programs like track work, traction power, but as well as our bus replacement program. Some of the other categories that we would have in here, health and safety, growth, McNichol Bus Garage would be included in the growth. Legislative, the biggest project in there would be our Easier Access program. On the where the money comes from section, you see that it's a mix between city funding being debt, contributions internally from the TTC operating budget, development charges, the reserve fund at 3%, which is the city's capital financing reserve, and then the remaining 54% comes a split between the provincial government, predominantly provincial gas tax, and the federal government, which is a split between the federal gas tax and PTIF funding. This slide is it's similar to the pie chart shown before. It shows you a breakdown of the different categories and expenditures, and really what it illustrates is of the $6.5 billion in funding that we have, how we've decided or prioritized to allocate our funds. And really, if you look at this, what this reflects is that we've ensured we have funding available for our health and safety and legislative requirements. We've ensured we have the funding needed to meet our maintenance and state of good repair needs. And then we've also ensured that we have of our funded program funds available to complete capital projects or to meet past obligations. So that would be completing a project that's ongoing like our McNichol Bus Garage, obligations like our share of funding on the PTIF program, or the continuation of previous obligations or orders like our streetcar orders or our bus purchases. The next slide. So the next slide is it's a chart that shows our growing state of good repair backlog. One thing I want to be clear about with this is this chart really focuses on our capacity to spend reductions. needs that we have that must be met, but we don't have the capacity to deliver to. So it's a combination of not having the funds, but also not demonstrating that we're spending to that level. What this does not include is any of the unfunded projects that have been identified as part of our capital investment plan. This is strictly the impact growing from under 50 million to over 700 million of our capacity spend reductions. So I'll take a quick second just to speak about the capital investment plan. So the TTC is, as Rick had mentioned earlier, we released a 15-year capital investment plan following a comprehensive review of all of our stated grid repair needs and our capital requirements needed to support ridership growth. I will note that we have actually brought some hard copies of our capital investment plan. We've left them with the clerk, so they're available if anyone would like a hard copy, and those can be available to you. Otherwise, they are available on the TTC website. Yeah. All right. So the capital investment plan identified $33.5 billion in capital funding requirements over the 15-year planning period, and nearly $24 billion of that is needed within the 10-year time frame. What this chart shows you is the funding that we have available in the 10 years, as well as funding that we expect over the next 15 years based on current funding levels. And it shows that we have about $17.5 billion worth of unfunded projects within the 10-year planning period. One thing I do want to note, and there's a solid black line that you'll see there, what that line actually represents is the average amount of funding that we have received, annual funding that we have received over the last 6 years. And what it shows is that annually we've actually received $1.2 billion. And you do see a decline in that, but one thing that I want to stress is through every budget process, we continue to work with City Finance and look for opportunities to find more funds to come into our 10-year plan. This has been, the city's identified new or accelerated funding in the past to be able to get to that level. We've also worked, there's been new funding programs like PTIF 1 that was identified through the feds to bring up our funding levels, as well as funding programs initiated through the province, like the LRV funding program that we got for the new streetcars. So if that $1.2 billion annually was to be able to continue throughout the course of the 10 or 15 years, that would be a dramatic reduction in the amount of unfunded projects that we currently have. And if I take you to the next slide, so this, and I apologize, it's somewhat difficult to see, but what this details is really that $17.5 billion list of unfunded capital projects. I'm not going to take you through each and every single one of them, but just some of the key projects, and I know that Rick had mentioned a few of them earlier, but Line 1 capacity enhancements, about $5.5 billion, currently unfunded. Bloor-Young capacity improvements, over $1 billion, that is not currently funded. The 9th bus garage, we have the funds available for land acquisition, early design work, and some other requirements, but the key portions of that capital projects remain unfunded, about $350 million. The purchase of buses, and Rick had mentioned this, we have funding to be able to purchase additional new buses over the next couple of years, but then the funding really does start to dry up. It gets to a point where we don't have money to purchase within 3 years. And we don't currently have funding available for Line 2 ATC resignaling. So that's our presentation. Thank you for your time, and we're available for any questions.
Well, I don't think, oh, there's Councillor Perks. I was just
trying to confer with my colleague.
You've taken over the de facto budget committee member from your colleague from last year.
His former colleague.
I will say that my former colleague did send me a cheat sheet on one department.
Oh, okay.
You can all guess which department that was.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That was quite informative. I want to turn back to the slide 13 about ridership and revenue trends, and it was very helpful to have the distinction between boardings and fee pay. Is the number of hours of revenue service for bus, streetcar, and subway, is that growing in each of those?
Through you, Chair, that's correct. As part of the 2019 budget, we kept about 50,000 hours that we could use to accommodate the needs of any of the modes as we go through the year.
So 50,000 hours against what baseline?
Through the chair, so we had, as part of our 2018 budget, there was just under 9.3 million service hours. Those included in our budget, split between bus, streetcar, and subway. You'll see that for the 2019 budget, we have at 9.453 million service hours.
So that's, I can't do math today. It's like a 10%, it's not even, it's like a 5% increase in service hours-ish?
No, well, it's 9 million service hours, so every 90,000, roughly 9, so every 90,000 is going to be about 1%.
So it's about 1.5, so it's about a 1.5% increase in service hours.
It's about half a percent.
0.5% in increase in service hours. Thank you, I'm tired, I've been doing this all day. So I wish there was someone here from planning, but my memory is that the population of the City of Toronto is growing by over 1% a year. Is that right? Does anyone know that? It's growing by about 35,000?
Between 30 and 35,000 a year.
30 and 35,000 on a base of about 3 million, so 1.1%. So the service hours that we're increasing here are growing at half the rate of the population growth in the City of Toronto. Is that correct?
Well, I think what would be perhaps useful through the chair, Councillor, is it would be interesting to be requested to come back with a briefing note, having a look at the long view, because the increase in service hours isn't just the 50,000. There are other things going on. We were at 9 million service hours just a couple of years ago. So,
yes, and I complained that it wasn't growing at that time.
Yes, but I would be actually interested to commit that to memory. What is our growth in service hours? We also have to pay attention to the split between bus, streetcar, and subway, because each of the
We could
modes...
have a very long beer about this, but maybe I will ask for you guys to see if you could put together something in writing, because there are two pieces to this that I think are really worth us understanding better. I believe that our growth in service hours has not been keeping up with the rate of population growth, which is astonishing to me because our official plan and every single development review application is based on the idea of that development's access to public transit service, the theory being that we're supposed to be getting a higher percentage of new Torontonians taking transit than currently do, but the math would suggest that otherwise, but it's actually going the other way.
Yes, just a couple of points of clarification. Our actual service hours across all modes are up 2% in the 19 budget compared to 18 forecast. But I think even that is potentially misleading if I were to anticipate what your next question might be, because a new streetcar carries more passengers than an old streetcar. So I think that it would be interesting to take a look at system capacity, not just in terms of hours,
capacity and
but overall, and compare that to ridership.
So, because what I would really like to understand, you know, I want to get beyond what I see when I turn on CP24 and there's someone standing behind a podium saying, making Toronto better, or whatever it is they're saying. I want to understand if we're actually, on a per capita basis, improving transit service. My contention would be over the last 4 years, no, but I'd like to actually know that. Can you tell me, now obviously for streetcar it's in decline right now, the total number of hours of revenue service, probably even the number of seats, that's in decline.
I'll take that through you, Chair. So where we're going with this is we currently have about 70 buses a day running streetcar service. And as you're aware, there was a point in time when we had 202 streetcars operating. That number is now down in the 150, 140, 150 range.
No, I keep trying to board the Dufferin bus.
Right, and it's supplemented with buses. Okay. All right. At the end of 2019, we believe we'll have around the 204 streetcars on order to be.
I see I'm almost out of time. With the indulgence of the chair,
Let's go.
Now you made it go out of my head. You distracted me.
I can just.
I get a senior's discount at Shoppers now. Maybe if I can come back. I'm over time.
Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, this is just foundational stuff for if we are looking through the unmet need. There's a sort of an industry standard for if we want to order buses, if we want to order streetcars, if we want to order subway cars, from the time council makes the decision, how long to come up with the specs, how long to procure, how long to build. So say we decided that's a scary bus number, we want to order you some buses. What time frame are we looking?
Through you, Chair, just going from history and back, you know, to get a train is about 7 years.
Trains, rats,
by the time you get the
Trains,
spec on
7
the
years.
street. To get a streetcar right now, you could probably get a streetcar in 5 years, in a bus in roughly 3 years, knowing where the manufacturing is going on in the industry with those two.
Right, but unless we're asking for something extraordinary, buses are about 3 years.
That's correct.
Okay. The Wheel-Trans buses are somewhat unique because we've figured out our own thing and we're using that Sprint model, so we don't have to develop specs then.
Right, that's correct. We're actually using Metrolinx's specification to do buying for the GTHA and join their group last year. That's where we got these new vehicles.
Okay, so if we want to get biggest bang for our buck, or we want to smooth this out and ultimately we're going to need all of the above, we can use these time frames to start looking at if you had a big amount of money and you could put it into every capital year for the next 10 years, you could have buses coming here, knowing that you're not going to have to pay for trains for 7 years at a minimum.
Through you, Chair, what I look at is I look at the life cycle of a vehicle and what we have today, and that's what this capital investment plan document is. It's life cycle replacement costs.
Okay.
Right? For instance, when we talk about line 2, we know that in 2026, they hit 30 years old, the oldest ones. All right? We're going to have to put money into the overhaul them, knowing there's not money available to replace the entire portfolio of streetcars. Buses have a 12-year life, as you're aware, 13, we have 13 years. So it's in a cycle like that.
And is it fair to say that transit is fairly unique to, you know, there's unmet need across the system. We've been highlighting that in all of our questions for 2 days. But is it fair to say that because these vehicle buys and the length of time it takes to actually have them delivered from the political decision to it's working in the system is such that this division more than any other really to be able to meet what the politicians might want, we need to decide on a 20-year basis right now and commit to beginning to build our financial position such that we're able to deal with that. And in the first 5 years after the 10-year plan we're adopting this month. Okay, 20-year plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKelvey, then Nunziat after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Continuing on the lens of service and capacity enhancements that Councillor Perks was asking about, you spoke briefly to streetcars. Can you maybe elaborate on what's happening with the bus network, and has that been expanded or accelerated in the last few years?
So the size of the fleet is roughly 2,000 vehicles. And as I mentioned, we have about 70 of those vehicles on a daily basis providing service to streetcar. So as we look forward, we know that those 70 vehicles in 2020, majority of them should be freed up to go back to the bus fleet. We also know that when Crosstown opens in 2021, that frees up additional vehicles on the bus fleet, and Finch as well. So when we look into the future, we know that we have 100 to 125 vehicles that will accommodate us in the next few years, all right, to address growth. And we also know that McNichol Garage would be serviceable by the 3rd to 4th quarter of 2020 as well. So when you look at the capital investment plan, I'm really looking out beyond 2021 on what the needs are for replacement for vehicles, keeping reliability and consistency for what we have today.
And in terms of your ask to the city, you're asking for an additional 22 million more this year, and I was wondering if you could put that into perspective for me as the newbie. How is that as a percentage increase compared to what you've done previous years? So it's 3% more this year. Is that traditional, or?
It's the, through you, Chair, it is the lowest increase, if you combine conventional and Wheel-Trans, it is the lowest increase in 10 years. It is half of the amount of increase over the last 4 years. So by both recent standards, it's quite a bit lower, and even by looking back 10 years, it is the lowest increase that we have requested in quite some time.
And with the 10-cent fare increase, nobody's happy to pay more, including myself when I take TTC, but what is being done about equity in the fare system?
So I'll maybe defer a little bit to Rick on this as well, but this is something that we gave thought to, and this is forever coming up whenever we are proposing a fare increase. And so a few things happened. We limited the fares fare increase to 5 cents rather than the 10 that it might have been. Other things are helping, like the 2-hour transfer and the kids ride free. The city's program, we're supporting the city in its expansion of its fares fare program. So we appreciate that that is not enough, but there are things that are going on that we think are causing the TTC to be better value for all our riders, but in particular those who have equity needs and need to make sure that they're getting the most value they can for their $2 or $3 fare.
And for those that ride a lot, it looks like this year, I just want to see if my math is right here. So you have about 25.8, 26 million more in revenue from the 10-cent increase. And it looks like that's less than the 34 million that it costs to bring in that hop on, hop off. Is that correct? So,
correct.
So there is potential savings for some folks to have with the 2-hour transfer overall.
I want to make sure I've understood your question through the chair.
So what did the hop on,
Savings
hop?
for individuals?
Yeah, the 2-hour transfer, what did that cost?
Through the chair, the full year cost of the 2-hour transfer that was introduced last year is 20.5 million.
Okay.
In addition to that, there were capacity improvements that were added last year. The full cost of those capacity improvements were 13.5 million. So the two initiatives combined is where you're north of $30 million in added costs.
Okay. And given that nobody wants to pay more, especially if you see that people are maybe evading fares, what is in this budget for fare evasion?
We've got the main thing in the budget vis-a-vis fare evasion is, in terms of personnel, is that we've added 70 positions, which will be primarily fare inspectors, and then some transit enforcement and 3 supervisory administrative positions to support the 70 positions coming on. If I'm not mistaken, that will bring our number of fare inspectors, once they're all on board, up to 113. So from a personnel point of view, that's what we're doing. We're also looking at other fairly low cost, for example, social media, things that we can be doing to be emphasizing, educating our riders and emphasizing the need to comply with the need to pay.
And my last question is, we had the SRT go down for several days a couple weeks ago. How do you plan for that budgetary-wise for contingencies around those sorts of weather-related unexpected events? And what's in this budget about that?
Through you, Chair, we continue to address that primarily on overtime, and with all honesty, we know that during that cold weather spell that the systems on the SRT failed, and we just automatically go to a backup plan is to bust that line with the age of it. We're in the process of redoing the vehicles again, all right, but the useful life of that system is coming to an end. We're really trying to maintain it to 2026 at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Nunziata.
Actually, on Councilor McKelvey's question, that was my question as well. So you're hiring the inspectors. So do we know, because, I mean, people, riders, if they know they can get on a streetcar and not pay, they're going to do it. So do we know how much revenue we've lost?
If you'll, through the chair, if you'll forgive me for this answer, Councillor, you heard the Auditor General this morning say that she was coming forward to the TTC board and through the TTC board to City Council with her fare evasion report at our very next board meeting on February 27th. And I think it would be most appropriate for her to let her come forward with her report rather than for us to comment on it.
Okay, but was the problem, did we start having the problem, I know, rather than ask what the amount is, when we started, for streetcars, we started opening up the back door and just have people accessing the streetcar from both both ends?
I'll take that through you, Chair. I would say no. The practice in the field, recognizing how crowded these streetcars were, is operators were opening the back doors. And when we did audits of those riding the streetcars, we saw, I believe the number was in the 60% range of customers that actually had a Metro Pass on them going to the back door, whether they were showing it or not. So the implementation of the proof of payment was more of a transition, recognizing that the new streetcars that were purchased years ago, and as they rolled in, have the operator in a cab in the front. So although we started it a few years earlier to maximize the movement of vehicles,
Right.
I would say that because of that, now what we realized was, as we were transitioning to the Presto card, right, with our fare inspectors, as they're out there, it was much easier for them to inspect fares when they were looking at people holding a card. Now, fare inspectors have to actually ask the person, can you tap your Presto card for me so I can get the color indication and the verbiage that says you paid. So it takes a little bit more time now than it did before, all right, and we're going to get better numbers as we move forward with that.
Yeah, because I know that I've been getting a lot of complaints on that. So just two other questions. Page 17, your presentation, the $8 million for the Eglinton Crosstown. What is that again, the $8 million?
So we are incurring extra costs. We have service standards for buses. As you can imagine, Eglinton Crosstown is affecting Eglinton as a through fare, both for all riders, all drivers, but also TTC vehicles across the city. If you imagine how many of our bus routes go north and south, and Eglinton Crosstown cuts pretty much the full width of the city, a remarkable proportion, if I'm recalling correctly, something like a third of our bus routes, we have had to add extra service in order to maintain our service standards. And you heard Rick a few minutes ago say that as Eglinton Crosstown construction frees up the street, that's actually going to free up 120 buses or so for us, because we'll be able to take buses off and still maintain our service standards. A bus costs about $98, fully costed. That's a third-party validated number. And so we know how many buses we've had to put on across all of these bus routes in order to maintain our service standards, and that cost is in the budget. You see the number of $8 million. The reason it's in the budget as an item is that we are in discussions with Metrolinx about getting reimbursed for that $8 million cost.
And that's what I was going to say. Why not have Metrolinx pay for that? We should.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Because they should be paying. One other question. There's no page number, but where it says service improvements and initiatives, I guess it's page 7, where for November 2017, November 2018, you've got Mount Dennis here planned to 222 buses, actual 222, 100% improved service. Can you tell me exactly what that was? What was that service improvement? And where was it? It says Mount Dennis. I just want to know exactly.
So what the slide is saying,
Yeah.
and I'll let Rick jump in as soon as he wishes, is the slide is showing that for each of the garages, what the planned number of buses.
Oh, you're talking about the garage.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking, okay, sorry.
No, it's not.
So I thought it was Mount Dennis. So you're talking about the Mount Dennis garage that's
Yes.
on Industry Street, on Industry.
Yes. And the way we measure every
okay.
morning, we are measuring how many and it's similarly for the streetcars and similarly for the subways.
Yeah.
How many buses did we plan to put out? And I can tell you, Rick is absolutely, there is a reason why it's all green check marks on the right-hand side. And
Right.
because Rick is absolutely adamant. Every planned bus goes out actual. He wants to see at least 100% every day. And there was some conversation about whether that was even possible, but helped with some good planning and helped with all the new buses that we have, we were able to put out 100% bus service pretty much every day.
So that's the Mount Dennis garage that you're referring to. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Layton?
Yes, thank you very much. Two sort of lines of questioning. There's a couple different ways of measuring the rate of subsidy that riders have in Toronto versus other major markets, major systems. Can you mentioned one to me prior. Can you just explain it to to us?
Sure, through the chair. So we can look at a subsidy per ride calculation, which is essentially just looking at our estimated ridership and dividing the amount of funding that we would receive through city subsidy. The other calculation that is one that is generally used through APTA is what is called the RC ratio, revenue to cost, which is essentially looking at the amount of funds that are coming from the fare box.
Compared with the amount that's
compared to overall
by.
costs.
And where does Toronto rank nationally, internationally, globally on that RC ratio?
So this is something that I've taken an interest in because I was interested, and I mentioned this at the TTC board meeting a couple of weeks ago, I was interested with the statement that we were the lowest funded of all the major transit systems in North America. And the first system, and I'll give full credit to Joe Farag of the city who suggested that I look at this. He didn't suggest any particular city, but the first one I happened to look at was Montreal. And I noticed that Montreal's funding ratio, which they report to APTA, which is the industry association that all the transit systems tumble their numbers into, Montreal gives a chunk of the debt service support to its transit system to the transit system, and then the transit system pays interest on its billions of dollars worth of debt. Whereas in the case of Toronto, the city carries that debt service cost. So if you'd have a look at the subsidy, whether it's per rider on an RC basis in Montreal versus Toronto, you have to make sure that you back that out. So we've taken on as a little project that we're going to go into the financial statements of the major transit systems that we would consider to be comparators, New York, Chicago, Montreal, Vancouver, and just make sure that we're comparing apples to apples. We're definitely comparing fruit, but it may not all be apples. Sure.
I envision a briefing note in your future to this end. How much travel time do you think we lose from a failure of equipment across the corporation?
Through you, Chair, I would tell you that today, compared to just 3 years ago, that the percentage of failure of equipment in service has dropped about 7 or 8%. And I'll use it for example. In buses just 3 years ago, out of the, say, 1,600 buses that went out in service a day, it wasn't uncommon for 100 to 125 buses a day to break down in service, have to be towed back or limp back in service. Today, we measure that in the CEO's report at about 1.5%. So it's significantly down. So when we talk about the reliability of our service, we're talking about on-time performance and being there, and we talk about providing what we advertise. But part of that is not just the operating part, it's the maintenance part as well. And the vehicles that we're maintaining are being maintained differently so they don't break down in service to negatively impact our customers.
So what's changed in that 3-year time? Is it preventative maintenance that's being done?
It's two things. It's a combination of new vehicles and preventative maintenance. Our overhaul practices at our Harvey and Duncan shops are extremely different today than they were just 3 to 5 years ago. It's about funding, it's about teaching, it's about kitting, it's materials management, it's having things there to fix them correct the first time.
So where did you get the funding for that? Did you reallocate internally? Was it a line item on a budget? Because 3 years ago, we had a line item on a budget about preventative maintenance, and we didn't fund it.
It's one of the capital budget line items that we used to do the overhaul work.
And can you, I'm just curious about pinpointing when that change and item came forward.
It would be interesting to look at, because actually our maintenance number I'd have to think about it from a gross point of view, but I think about maintenance as a source of savings right now.
Sure.
Because we have newer vehicles. So you can imagine if you've reduced the average age of your streetcars and your buses such that your maintenance costs could go down a little bit now, but you're now investing more, able to invest more in preventative maintenance, that you're adding back some of that cost. You end up with a much stronger maintenance operation, even though some of that has been paid for by the new fleet.
I think I just want to get to the point that we're funding the correct level of maintenance for the new vehicles so they don't end up like the position we were in a couple of years ago. If I could beg the indulgence of the committee, I have one more question, and it's to our CFO just about, can we use refundable debt for some of these vehicles because they are a revenue source? And why wouldn't we? Because they wouldn't pay the entire way back?
So through you, Mr. Chair, it's called recoverable debt, number one, but the recovery of the debt servicing has to come from a predictable funding stream over and above whatever else it might be used for. So it has to equal the payment. We would need more money, additional revenue.
Farebox would have to pay back.
Dedicated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Bradford?
Thanks very much. Through the chair, the AG had a number of procurement recommendations that are expected to yield some savings. What are the changes that they're recommending on procurement?
The AG had a number of very helpful recommendations. When I arrived, I certainly made a point of reading recent AG reports, and her reports relating to both materials and also telecommunications were two that I looked at. She, just going from memory, one of the things that she was encouraging us to look at is how we handled cores. She also felt that we could do a better job of taking advantage of aftermarket warranties. If we're not buying from OEMs, we're buying from aftermarket suppliers, making sure that they actually honor their warranties. She encouraged
aftermarket suppliers or
aftermarket
OEM?
Suppliers. So if you have a brake part and you buy it from the bus company, that comes at a higher price, but it also comes with easier warranty. She found that when we bought from third-party suppliers, brake parts, for example, sometimes they weren't good about honoring the warranty, and we weren't as good as we could be about making sure that they did. We could do a better job of tracking that.
Did the report give us a projected savings for 2019 if we were to implement these things? Ballpark?
So, through you, Chair, I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here and say that yes, she did estimate savings were possible in the current budget year that we're in, 2019, of $2 million. But she told me conversationally that she thought we could do better. I spoke with Rick about it and with the procurement group, and I am completely satisfied we're going to do better than that, thanks to her good work, her team's good work, and we're determined to, we need those savings this year, which I think we can yield with no impact on service, no impact on our maintenance operation, just tuning up the organization a little bit.
The subsidy request all in for the TTC is at $620 million from the city this year. Is that correct? That's what we have.
That's just conventional.
And is that with Wheel-Trans, or is that Wheel-Trans would be?
Through the chair, so if you include Wheel-Trans, it would be $763 million.
Okay.
And it's $622 million for conventional and $141 million for Wheel-Trans.
Okay. What was that in comparison to last year's number, 2018?
So combined, it's a $22 million increase, or 3%, shifted slightly different between conventional and Wheel-Trans.
Over last year. Okay. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the service improvements and initiatives, and I appreciate the CEO's report. One of the metrics I like to look at is the percentage of on-time departures. And on some routes, we do really well on that. On others, we're still improving. Is there a reason that we always measure at the terminal, at the end point, terminus, versus somewhere where you might have higher ridership, like midstream, for example?
So the way we look at it is we look at how we advertise our service to the public, leaving in terminals. We also measure midpoint, but the intent here is if you're not leaving on the ends on time, how can you get to midpoints on time? Mm-hmm. So we actually are in the process of installing a new CAD AVL, we call it our vision system, computer-aided dispatch system. So it allows us to get better information in the future so we can refine our schedules.
And the vision system will allow us to GPS track more accurately the cars. How long until we get the vision system? I know it's a lot, and it's a total change. Is that?
Right, it's mid-installation right now. It's probably 18 months before we have it fully up and operational and using all the information. And that's why when you hear me talk about runners-directed vehicles, whether it's trains, streetcars, buses, it's having vehicles available to audible, as I tell people, in the field to fill the gaps so that we're not kicking people off but good vehicles and taking it from A to Z.
One more question I'm going to try and slip in here. Basically, when I think about if we can decrease running time, that's really like increasing speed, and I think the 504 in King Street is a great example of that. Since the King Street pilot was introduced, do we have a sense of how many vehicles have been saved on the 504? I would imagine we've added more because ridership has gone up significantly, but then we're also adding larger capacity cars. Is there a sense there of how that landed?
I'd have to get you that information.
Okay, yeah. Rode the TTC in this morning. It was actually fantastic. I was bracing for the worst, but it was good today. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? I know, Councillor Perks, you feel like you're part of the Budget Committee, but the reality is we have to see if the committee would like to do a second round. But would the committee like to do a second round? Okay. Okay, Councillor Perks, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. So yesterday morning, when I was sandwiched between two constituents on the Dundas bus, one was standing on my foot and the other had an elbow in my eye, one of them asked me when we're going to get the streetcars back. And I'm wondering if in this budget we're showing a plan to order the follow-on cars, or if we're just going to retender, and what the timelines would be with each of those two options.
Through you, Chair. Part of the capital investment plan document is to just identify just that. In June of last year, we took a report to the board answering the question of what the process would be and how long it would take and who would provide them. And in the funding section, there is no funding. In October of last year, the opportunity...
I appreciate there's no funding. I'm wondering, given that at some point I think Council's going to have to turn their minds to this, given what's going on King, given all the other issues, given your general fleet constraints, I'm wondering if you can give me a sense of what, if Council in its wisdom decided tomorrow you've got to order more streetcars, is there a difference in procurement time if we notify Bombardier that we would like to order the follow-on cars versus if we decide to retender altogether for an equivalent number of vehicles?
I would predict, through the chair, I would predict that if we were to take advantage of what's available to us under the Bombardier contract, if that were of interest, that would be faster than starting from scratch. But I would also say that some voices are saying that no, even starting from scratch, because some manufacturers are so clever and so fast, they could. So I'm nervous giving you a definitive answer, but ordinarily one would predict that if you take advantage of an option under an existing contract, it would be faster than starting from scratch.
Okay, and earlier, Mr. Leary, you talked about if we're doing a procurement from scratch, it takes, I think it was 7 years for a subway car? From scratch, what is it for streetcar?
I think about 5 years is what we're looking at.
5 years from scratch?
Our plan looks at needing those additional streetcars, I believe it was for 2024.
Okay, so if we were going to order from scratch, we'd have to procure today. So another thing, so you're a transit professional. If you're ordering, so City of Toronto has a unique streetcar track gauge. So if we were to order from a new supplier, it would be a vehicle that's not out there and tested. Am I correct that the failure rate among vehicles that are operating in revenue service for the first time is generally much higher than something that you've been able to put in service and work out the bugs with over time? You're a railway guy. Tell me the answer.
I've never had a vehicle that came into revenue service right away without needing some modifications and tweaks in the first couple of years to get the reliability that is necessary.
And we've started through that process with Bombardier. We're figuring out how to make them work. If we went to someone new, you say we're already at the window 5 years. We would have, not necessarily the same as Bombardier, but we would have a period at the beginning as we were introducing them where there would be a much higher failure rate than what we would expect with a vehicle that we had experience with.
When you say much higher failure rate, I do a comparison of what we have today and the reliability of the existing vehicles versus the Bombardier vehicles. You're talking, 3,000 kilometers between failure to 15,000. So the spec of the contract requires 35,000 K. It'll take us a while to get there, but anything's better than what we have is when I talk in that context.
Okay, thank you. I think I understand this better now.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions for the TTC? Seeing none, thank you very much and appreciate the time and the patience of waiting all day, or most of the day anyway. Okay, colleagues, we're going to take about a 10-minute recess. As we do every year, we have a multitude of briefing note requests coming in. We've been reviewing a number of them. There's a combination of some of them actually look like larger reports and may not be able to be handled by staff as a briefing note. So, and we're just trying to get them all into one larger briefing note. So we're going to take about 10 minutes. We'll come back, and then we'll run down the entire briefing note. There's 25 or so that I've seen. So there's quite a few. We just have to kind of go through it. Most of them, as I said, some probably won't make it through. It's not that we don't want to. I guess there are some that are just staff couldn't complete them in a week or 2 weeks because they're not briefing notes. They're actually more report requests. So anyway, we're just figuring all that out, and we'll be back. Let's take a 10-minute recess, and we'll be back, and then we'll be done fairly quickly after that. Okay, I think we're ready, everyone. If we all want to grab our seats. Is Councillor McKelvey's there? Okay. Start off with this one, and then we can do the other ones. So this 2 point. Yeah. So we're going to do briefing notes. And we're referring some to the next meeting. Yes. Okay, there's a couple more. Okay, a couple more. Yes. Okay. Okay, I think we have it all together. So just really quickly, just to give a rundown, we're going to be doing some briefing note requests that are going to be coming up first. After that, there are a couple of motions or report requests that we're going to be referring to the next meeting. And I know Councillor Layton, you have one motion, and I have, I believe, one motion as well. So we're only going to make decisions on briefing notes now. We're referring a number of motions to the next, well, it'll end up being the final wrap-up. So we'll see as they come up on the screen. I think it'll be self-evident, I'm hoping. Oh, yeah.
People can move their motions.
Okay, we're calling on speakers. So I guess Councillor Layton, you have some...
We're going to go first here. Motion A. Do you want motions or briefing notes first?
I think let's do briefing notes first.
Okay. Item 2.4. Okay. So not the 2.1 ones. Okay. 2.4. I have a list of briefing notes. First, the city clerk, and I may be able to answer questions on some of these. I might not be. Some of these are made on behalf of some of my colleagues. One, that city clerk provide a briefing note on the following: the expected cost in coming years to remain compliant with the Municipal Elections Act. Under city planning, that the chief planner, city planning provide budget briefing notes on the following: a list of the current ongoing and planned heritage plans and studies and a timeline for when we expect to complete them. 2, a strategy to address the backlog of heritage conservation districts. And 3, a strategy to address the backlog of requests to designate and list properties with heritage value. Facilities, real estate, energy and environment and energy. General manager, facilities management provide a briefing note on 1, what the delays of implementing Transform TO and how any delays might impact our ongoing CO2 reduction goals. 2, this probably should be the general manager of energy and environment. Just, don't we? Sorry, director of energy and environment. Is that Josie's? Who's the general manager of facilities management? Why would they be doing whatever? 2, whether they'll know who's supposed to write it. 2, whether the deferral of payment towards the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act puts the city at risk of being out of compliance with the province's mandated deadline. 3, a list of all security costs. Do I have to read this all?
I don't.
Should I?
We're going to go through these. We're going to go through these one by one as well. We're going to be voting on them individually.
Okay. Then, why don't we just table them all? And I'll say I think that while dealing with the budget process, sometimes there's a little more information that we need. I'm not sure that any are terribly onerous. I will highlight the last one, which is about snow maintenance. That some of the items are similar to a letter that the mayor wrote that asked for a report. I'll just note to everyone that carries absolutely zero weight with actually with staff, given what the mayor's powers are under the City of Toronto Act. And this would allow us to have this document in front of us while dealing with the 2019 budget. I hadn't seen the mayor's letter because we didn't vote on it. It was just something that they wrote and submitted to the media. And so and to our general manager of transportation. I, for one, would love to see if we could enhance winter maintenance for next year, rather than us continue to get calls about how terrible it is to get around the City of Toronto after major snowfalls. That's it. Oh, should I introduce the other pieces as well? No? Pardon me?
I'm going to work on this one first, and then we'll... Okay, so if we can just do them, I guess add seriatim, each individual one. So City Clerk's office will be the first one. Oh, okay, I realized everybody should be speaking and moving their motions, and then we'll move them afterwards. So I believe Councillor Carroll is next.
Similarly, I have some motions that I'm moving on behalf of other councillors, and then a couple of my own that are much shorter. Economic development, that the general manager of ECDEV, the specific briefing notes on the following specific areas that cuts are anticipated to be made in 2019 as part of the base expenditure review. That there's a sum for base expenditure review, but no breakdown of what was used to come up with it. Specific ECDEV culture services being examined for efficiencies in 2019, because again, that's the base statement. So what's being examined? How savings were achieved in the area of cost of living adjustment expenditures, the specific funding that was reversed in 2018 to achieve one-time funding savings, what studies, if any, were originally planned to be initiated in 2019 that are being delayed to 2020 or later, whether delays to building condition audits in the 2019 budget will risk increased costs or irreparable damage to heritage properties in the ECDEV and culture portfolio, when the major special events reserve fund would be exhausted based on proposed and projected spending levels, and what groups are currently renting museum spaces, which among them represent equity-seeking or low-income groups. SS and HA, the general manager, consider that part read, provide a briefing note on the following. Any possible budget impacts on neighborhood information posts, trusteeship and rent bank programs, any opportunities to expand neighborhood information posts, trustee and rent bank programs, the current status and estimated cost of funding Regent Park phases 4 and 5, including the social development plan and the new community safety plan, and in consultation with the executive director, social development, finance and admin, and the general manager PF&R on the estimated cost to install and continuously stock free menstrual hygiene product dispensers at all city-funded shelters, drop-in centers, strong neighborhood community centers, and other centers working with homeless, street-involved, and low-income women, girls, and trans individuals. As directed, that is being moved because there was a motion to that effect that was referred to this budget process. It's not coming out of nowhere. There was a motion moved. It was meant to be in this budget, but the budget appears to be silent on that matter, even though it was referred here. On SDF&A, that the Executive Director SDF&A give a briefing note on the following. Whether the poverty reduction strategy can be fully implemented through 2035 at the current annual funding levels. And TRCA, that the Chief Executive Officer TRCA provide a budget briefing note outlining the cost of addressing the funding imbalance between municipalities over a 3-year time span. You'll recall I asked that question. There is a funding imbalance, and at 5% it's significant. So if we took a multi-year approach to addressing the funding imbalance, what would that look like in our multi-year outlook is what I'm getting at there. And finally, TTC. That really isn't the topic here, because what I want is the unmet need net of TTC. So really the topic here is the City of Toronto writ large. That the Executive Director Financial Planning provide a budget briefing note on the estimated unmet capital need of the City of Toronto over 10 years, net of the Toronto Transit Commission's stated $33 billion. TTC is all wrapped up in a big bow for us in this shiny plan. Unmet need is mentioned throughout the corporate budget. I'd really like the grand total of it, and then we'll really know. I could go through every analyst note and pull it out myself, because they each has done a good job of quantifying and spelling it out for us, but I'd like it in one sheet. That will be more helpful for me in communicating what my goals are financially over the next number of years. So that's why I'm moving that one. Having it all on one piece of paper, I think, will help us make long-term plan decisions.
I believe we have Councillor Bradford next.
Okay.
So they'll come up, I believe, as I understand, these aren't briefing note requests, but they're motions that will be referred to the next.
Right.
To the next, to the first wrap-up, but these are referral motions. So they're kind of tabled, I guess, till the next meeting, as opposed to voting on them today. Okay. But we have to vote for referring them, technically.
Do I have to read them all?
Yeah, we can go through them, yeah.
Okay. I don't know, do you want me to?
You can.
Okay. Economic Development and Culture. City Council requests the General Manager, Economic Development and Culture, to report to the Budget Committee on the following for consideration prior to the 2020 budget process: the metrics and tools that can be used to measure the impact on reducing vacant storefronts of the elimination of the vacant commercial and industrial tax rebate program. City Planning. City Council requests the Chief Planner and Executive Director of City Planning to report to Budget Committee on the following for consideration prior to 2020 budget process: the amount of Section 37 funds, cash contributions secured for affordable housing and affordable housing initiatives citywide over the past 5 years, 2014 to 2018. TTC. City Council requests the City Manager, in consultation with the CEO, Toronto Transit Commission, to report to Budget Committee on the following for consideration prior to the 2020 budget process. One, request that TTC and the City of Toronto have made of the provincial and federal governments for operating and capital investments in Toronto's transit system. 2, the current and projected funds available from other levels of government in the 10-year capital budget, the time periods for which the funding is available, and any additional funding requests that should be made to the provincial and federal governments. Parks, Forestry, and Recreation. City Council requests the GM, Parks, Forestry, and Recreation, in consultation with the General Manager of Toronto Water and the Chief Planner and Executive Director of City Planning, to report to the Budget Committee on following for consideration prior to the 2020 budget process: budget allocated for the implementation of Toronto's ravine strategy.
Okay, I believe I'm next. So this is on BU 2.4. These are, again, referral motions coming to the next wrap-up. One that's, I guess, City Council requests the Executive Director, Social Development, Finance Administration to consider the following in poverty reduction strategy: evaluation of additional youth spaces, the Toronto Public Library Open House Program, and the amount of the base budget as a result of the strategy by 2035. Second one is that we request the CFO and Treasurer to work with the divisions and agencies to identify future annual budget documents, process documents, cost reductions resulting from the Auditor General's reports. The second one is also referring to the Auditor General and bringing back reports. Number 4, Councillor Layton, this deals with Mayor Tory's announcement or request on transportation services, the cost of consideration for delivery of enhanced snow service, clearing on sidewalks on residential streets in every neighborhood, pathways and parks, enforcement of parking that obstructs Toronto Transit Commission and bike lanes, and the cost of increasing the amount of snow removal citywide. So that takes care of your concern on your briefing note request.
It doesn't, but.
Okay. Now we have, are we just doing 2. Any other speaker? This is on 2.4, by the way. So then we'll be doing 2.1 afterwards. Okay, I think we're ready to, now we're going to go down through them individually if we can. So I guess we're beginning with Councillor Layton's. We can get it up on the...
Like 6 other councillors.
Well, yeah. So the first one, City Clerk.
Blame them all on me.
So, City Clerk's office. First one, all in favor? Opposed, that's carried. City Planning, we'll do 1, 2, and 3, which is the next one there. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Sorry, that loses. Okay. Okay, all in favor? You recorded vote?
Yes, please. On part 2 of Councillor Layton's motion 1, all in favor? Councillor Carroll and Councillor Layton, all opposed. Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Nunziata, and Councillor McKelvey. The motion does not carry. The vote is 4-2.
These are reports, not briefing note requests. The next one, Facilities, Real Estate, Environment, and Energy. We'll do it, if we could do it ad seriatim, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Number 1, all in favor? Opposed? Number 1 loses. Councillor Layton wants it recorded. All in favor?
On part 1, facilities, real estate, and environment and energy, all in favor, Councillor Carroll and Councillor McKelvey and Councillor Layton.
Opposed?
All opposed? Was that?
Oh, sorry, you got to do that.
Sorry, can I repeat that? All in favor, Councillor Bradford? Yes. Councillor Layton? Councillor Carroll? All opposed? Councillor Crawford?
Which is number 1. Yeah, we are splitting facilities, real estate, environment, and energy. There we go. So it's highlighted.
Yeah.
This is the one we're voting on.
So in part 1 of facilities, real estate, environment, and energy, all in favor? Councillor Bradford, Councillor Carroll, Councillor McKelvey, Councillor Layton. All opposed? Councillor Crawford? Your vote, please. Councillor Nunziata. That carries.
Number 2. All in favor?
On part 2, all in favor, Councillor
Did you want recorded?
No. I do. Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Carroll, Councillor McKelvey, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Layton. That carries unanimously, 6 in favor.
Okay, number 3. Because we literally just finished it just before we started voting. Number 3. That was me. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Number 4. Consequences of delaying the path. All in favor? Opposed? That loses. Number 5. All in favor?
All in favor, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Carroll, Councillor McKelvey, Councillor Nunziata, and Councillor Layton. That carries unanimously, 6 in favor.
Okay, next, policy, planning, finance, administration. Number 1, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Shelter support and housing administration. The whole thing, we can do it all together. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Social development, finance, and administration. If we could do that ad seriatim, please. Okay, number 1, all in favor?
All in favor, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Carroll, Councillor McKelvey, Councillor Nunziata, and Councillor Layton. That carries unanimously, 6 in favor.
Number 2, all in favor? So 2AB, all in favor? Opposed? Also, you want this recorded, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, on part 2 of social development, finance, and administration, all in favor? Councillor Bradford, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Layton, and Councillor Nunziata. All opposed? Councillor Crawford and Councillor McKelvey. That carries.
Okay, next one, Toronto Building. All in favor of Toronto Building, the 1, 2, and 3. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next one, Toronto Public Library. And the whole one, all in favor? Opposed? No. Well, unless I don't want it broken up unless.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't ask that.
Okay, let's do that again. All in favor?
Record it, please.
On Toronto Public Library, all in favor, Councillor Carroll and Councillor Layton. All opposed, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor McKelvey, and Councillor Nunziata. That does not carry.
Toronto Region Conservation Authority. All in favor? Opposed? It wasn't asked for? No, that lost. can't even, it's not even possible to do that. Toronto Transit Commission. We'll do these, so number 1 and 2. I can do them together. All in favor?
On Toronto Transit Commission, Part 1, all in favor, Councillor Carroll and Councillor Layton. All opposed, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor McKelvey, and Councillor Nunziata. That does not carry.
Okay, next is Transportation Services.
Part 2. Part 2 separately.
Oh, sorry, was that just Part 1?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll do Part 2 then. All in favor?
All in favor, Councillor Carroll and Councillor Layton. All opposed, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor...
This is opposed. We've recorded?
Opposed, Councillor McKelvey and Councillor Nunziata. That does not carry.
Okay, Transportation Services is next.
They also give us the sidewalk number every couple of years. Does somebody ask?
Okay. The next one, Transportation Services.
Councillors want to know things, I'm voting yes.
On Transportation Services, all in favor, Councillor Carroll and Councillor Layton, please. All opposed, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor McKelvey, and Councillor Nunziata. That does not carry.
Okay, next, I believe, is Councillor Carroll's motions. Okay, Corporate Services. Councillor, do you want these recorded or not?
Yes, I would, because the councillor who I voted on behalf of is not here.
Okay, so these are recorded?
Yes.
On Councillor Carroll's motion as it pertains to corporate services, all in favor, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor McKelvey, and Councillor Layton. That carries unanimously, 6 in favor.
So Economic Development and Culture, do you want it all together?
Yeah, all together recorded.
Okay, all in favor?
Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor McKelvey, and Councillor Layton. That carries unanimously, 6 in favor.
Okay, Shelter Support and Housing Administration, A, B, C, and D, all in favor?
All in favor, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor McKelvey, and Councillor Layton. That carries unanimously, 6 in favor.
Okay, Social Development, Finance, and Administration, that's just number A.
On Social Development, Finance, and Administration, all in favor, Councillor Carroll and Councillor Layton. All opposed, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Nunziata, and Councillor McKelvey. That does not carry.
Toronto Region Conservation Authority.
On Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, all in favor, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor McKelvey, and Councillor Layton. That carries unanimously, 6 in favor.
And I believe the last one, Financial Planning.
On Financial Planning, all in favor, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor McKelvey, and Councillor Layton. That carries unanimously, 6 in favor.
Okay. So Councillor Bradford's. So I believe these ones were just.
These ones need to be.
So these ones are all being referred. Now we can, I'm comfortable just doing this as a package, just to get them referred to the next budget meeting. We don't make a decision on them now, but we will in final wrap-up. So these just being. Yeah, so these will be just included there. So they're all, I'm comfortable. Council, would you like them as a package?
Yeah, it's fine.
Or can we do them? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, mine and Councillor Bradford's. The ones that I've.
Did we see the chairs?
Yes. We did. You did.
Okay.
You can go through them again if you want, but I'm comfortable. Yeah, it was the Auditor General. We can do them. Okay. Do you want them? Anybody want them recorded? We can just move them. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, we've finished BU 2.4, I believe. Okay. Oh. So now we just need a motion to defer this item. Let me see. The consideration of the item be deferred until the February 13th, 2019 meeting of Budget Committee, which is the first wrap-up. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Thanks for the heads up. That would be great to know while we were moving it. So we're on item 1 now.
Okay.
So we can move to actions.
Okay, why don't we, so we're now on item 1. Councillor Layton?
Yes, thank you very much. I have two motions. I have two motions. One, and it should come as no surprise that the General Manager, Toronto Water, this is asking for a briefing note on the water surcharge program, industrial water surcharge program. And then motion number 2, which I have it on good authority that Lou already has this information prepared. Yeah, and then number 2, that is the motion itself to, that's direct, effective January 1, 2019, City Council approved the industrial water surcharge program formula for the calculation of surcharge fees be applied to all treatable parameters that exceed the sewer bylaw limits instead of only one parameter that exceeds the sewer bylaw limits by the greatest amount, allowing full cost recovery for wastewater services provided by the city, such surcharge to be phased in over a 6-year period to mitigate impacts to existing companies. I'll reserve any a speech on it to the water budget when we deal with this.
Okay. Councillor Bradford, I believe you have 2 items coming up. Oh, wait a minute, so that's 2.3. Okay, I apologize, so on 2.1. Okay, so I guess I have, so next I have, it's a briefing note request that the General Manager, Toronto Water, provide a briefing note that examines the options for modifying the Block 2 water rate to provide economic benefits for large water consumption manufacturers and present the implications for the increase of the discount using a rate of 1% to 5% and consider a phase-in of the options over the number of years. This is on behalf of Councillor, the Chair, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson, this was a request. All in favor?
We should vote on the briefing.
Oh, sorry, so this is,
We'll vote on the briefing notes.
okay.
And then we'll go.
Okay, we'll do the briefing notes.
So we can start with this one.
Okay, we'll do Councillor Layton's 2 briefing notes. Okay, first one, all in favor? Opposed, that carries. Okay, we'll do my briefing note. All in favor? Opposed, that carries. Oh, sorry. Okay.
It's coming, it's coming.
All in favor?
On motion 2 by Councillor Crawford, all in favor. Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Nunziata, and Councillor McKelvey, Councillor Layton. Any opposed? Councillor Carroll. That carries.
Okay, next we have, so this is a referral, Councillor Layton's. So this is your annual motion, Councillor, that we'll be referring? So on the the industrial waste surcharge program? Yeah, I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, that's what's coming up. Yeah, so that motion is going to the wrap-up. All in favor? No, it's just referred. So all in favor, opposed, that's carried. And, okay. the consideration of the item be deferred until the February 13th, 2019 meeting of Budget Committee. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, one last, I believe. So we're now going to 2.3? 2.2. So 2.2, okay. That we are, so this is on 2.2, the consideration of the item be deferred until February 13, 2019 budget. In favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we're now on item 2.3, and I believe Councillor Bradford, this is where you have. Oh, so, you know, I apologize, I should be listening. So, Councillor Layton, you have a briefing note request on.
Oh, do I? Yes, a briefing note request for the TPA. This involves some explanation of a service and rent expenditure thing, and then something regarding the King Street pilot. This is on behalf of Councillor Perks.
Yep. All in favor? Oh, yes, we need to do all the speakers. Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Bradford, I believe you have to speak. So you have a couple motions?
City Council requests TPA to request the President of Toronto Parking Authority to report to Budget Committee on the following consideration prior to 2020. Ridership changes at bike share stations directly adjacent to Richmond Adelaide and Bloor Street bike lanes from before implementation to implementation, and to the feasibility and financial impact of extending bike share travel times from 30 to 45 minutes for annual members.
Okay. So we'll do the voting now. I guess we'll do Councillor Layton's motion. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Councillor Bradford's is next. All in favor?
Oh, sorry. Oh. This one needs to be referred.
Oh, sorry, this one is referred. Will be referred to the wrap-up. So consideration of this motion 2 by Councillor Bradford be referred to the February 13th Budget Committee meeting. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. And now we're going to, the consideration of the item be deferred until February 13th, 2019 Budget Committee. All in favor? Opposed? I'm going on the advice of the clerk. There's a number of different items we have to do, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we have to do them individually. And is that? Oh, so we are done. Thank you very. I want to. By the way, I just want to thank the clerk staff for. There's a lot of work that's involved in. We go through this every year, and it's always a challenge. I just want to thank the clerk staff for pulling it off another year, and the staff who. Thank you very much. So we are now. Thank you. We're done till the first wrap up. Oh yeah. So the wrap up, but we also have. Some of us are back here. I would encourage subcommittee members who aren't here tomorrow, if you want to come to see what it's like, Councillor Bradford and McKelvey, during the day, you're invited, but you're not on the committee. But you're allowed to. You could show up.